A wild-eyed and aging Charles Manson is asked in an interview who he actually is. He goofs around a little, playing the madman he's expected to be, and whispers, "Nobody." He goes on, "I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine, and a straight razor if you get too close to me." Who was he? It's a good question. He became the embodiment of the American monster, a totemic ghoul representing the downfall of a decade that changed a country. He was a brutal winter that followed a summer of love. If you believe the hype, Manson was the evilest man in the world, the personification of a society gone wrong. He might have been bad, but if he was as evil and powerful as many people made him out to be is another question. The story of Manson has changed a lot over the years, especially since a guy named Tom O'Neill published an account of the Manson murders that took him 20 years to research. That book is called Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s, and our indefatigable researchers at the Infographic Show have read it. The Manson we all know from earlier books, especially Helter Skelter, the true story of the Manson murders, isn't quite the same guy after reading that. We won't go too much into Manson's upbringing, but we will say that the young Charles Manson didn't have the best start in life. He was bruised and broken from a young age. He was the fallout from the American dream, and crime became second nature to him, the petty stuff, at least during his younger years. He might have been the scapegoat that was set up to be the man that pretty much ended the idealism of the 60s counterculture. After his crimes came to light, the curtain was drawn on the hippie era, and it was business as usual in the USA. The final credits rolled over the glare of Manson's deranged face. What's interesting when we talk about how he got caught is how he also got away numerous times with a lot of crime. O'Neill's book tells us something we didn't fully understand about Manson's life. That is, he was arrested many times, but for some reason that doesn't make much sense, the cops just kept letting him go. O'Neill suggests that the cops released Manson on many occasions because someone wanted him released. Maybe Manson was part of someone's bigger plans. We know for a fact that the CIA back in those days was working on mind control projects using LSD. We also know that Manson, the Messiah, managed to get folks who followed him to commit some terrible crimes. The big question nowadays is, did the CIA use Manson as one of the test subjects, and did Manson employ the same mind control techniques on his family? By the time he was 32, he spent more than half his life in prison. Then in 1967, he violated his parole by leaving the state he was in and somehow got away with it. He ended up in San Francisco, where he became part of drug experiments at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. O'Neill cannot connect Manson with the CIA's own experiments, but let's just say the connection is plausible. In light of his story, we'll say that Manson was certainly a blip on the radar of the authorities. By the time he was arrested, that blip looked more like a coat of paint. It was around this time that he started his cult, the Manson family. It was also around this time that 10050 Cielo Drive, a house in Benedict Canyon, LA, was frequented by the rich and famous, the starlets, the freaks, anyone wanting a good time under the influence of a cornucopia of drugs. That's where up-and-coming actress Sharon Tate lived with her husband, film director Roman Polanski. This is where Polanski made videos of her. Let's just say some of those shoots were highly unethical. That remained a secret for a long time. What exactly went down in that house prior to the murders remains partly a mystery, but we know what happened on August 9, 1969. That was the murder of 5 people. Under the orders of Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel went to the house. Polanski was away in Europe making a movie, but Tate, then 8.5 months pregnant, was at home. Also in the house were Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent. Watson later testified he, Manson, said for me to take the gun and knife and go up to where Terry Melcher used to live. He said to kill everybody in the house as gruesome as I could. I believe he said something about movie stars living there. Terry Melcher is another story. He was a music producer who'd come to know Manson through the Beach Boys star Dennis Wilson. Melcher had once expressed interest in Manson's music only to snub him later. Melcher later lied under oath about the full extent of his relationship with Manson. Let's just say that Manson didn't like him after that rebuff of his questionable talents. He's also thought he still lived at the house at the time of the murders, or at least that's one story. Manson might have known Melcher didn't live there anymore. What seems sure, if you believe O'Neill's compelling research, is that Melcher knew Manson a whole lot better than he made out in court. It seems Melcher had been in a relationship with one of the young female Manson family, and that Tex Watson knew the house very well. He'd been in there many times before the night of the murders, according to O'Neill. So, all these people, the hippie freaks and the stars who were somehow mixed up. Manson had stayed with Wilson for a while before he and his family moved to a place called Spawn Movie Ranch, an abandoned place no longer used to shoot movies. On the night of the murders, Watson climbed up a telephone pole and cut the phone line to the house. The women were waiting nearby. The first of the victims, 18-year-old Parent, was the first to die. He approached Watson and asked what he was doing at his house, which ended with Parent being shot 4 times. Parent was only really at the house by accident. He wasn't part of this so-called scene. Watson then got to the house through a window and let the girls in through the door. Frykowski, who was asleep on the couch, was rudely awakened. Surprised, he asked Watson what he was doing in the house. Watson replied, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." One of the girls, Atkins, then got a towel and tied Frykowski's hands with it. Atkins, under Watson's order, went to see who else was in the house. She found Abigail Folger, a 25-year-old woman heir to a coffee business fortune, and she was the girlfriend of Frykowski. When Atkins walked into the bedroom, Folger was reading a book. This being a house where many people came and went, Folger just looked up and smiled at Atkins. Atkins then walked down the hall and looked into another room. There she saw the pregnant Tate, dressed only in her underwear, chatting with Sebring, a 35-year-old celebrity hairstylist. He'd once been the boyfriend of Tate, a young woman who just played her biggest film role in The 13 Chairs. Tate had been in good spirits, landing that role, about to have a child, and often being the center of attention of what she called the love house. She was also married to a man who often demeaned her. Atkins went back to the living room and told Watson what she'd seen. They both tied Frykowski again, this time with a nylon rope. Atkins then walked back to the bedrooms with a knife in her hand and ordered everyone to go to the living room. She said to Tate and Sebring, "Don't say a word or you're dead." Once in the living room, now frightened out of their lives, they pleaded with the intruders and offered them cash. All 3 of them were shoved onto their fronts and placed next to the fireplace. Watson tied a rope around the necks of Sebring and Tate and tied the same piece of rope to a beam in the ceiling. Sebring pleaded again, this time telling the intruders that Tate was obviously pregnant and this was disgusting behavior. Watson shot him on the spot. The others screamed. The rope tightened around Tate's neck. Watson then knelt down and repeatedly stabbed Sebring. He told one of the girls to turn off the lights. Tate screamed, "What are you going to do with us?" Watson replied, "You're all going to die." Frykowski managed to get out of his binds, but Atkins was soon on him, stabbing him numerous times all over his body. With blood everywhere, he tried to run out the door, but Atkins ran after him. Watson put 2 bullets into Frykowski and then broke the butt of the gun after hitting him over the head. Folger, still in her nightgown, managed to make a run for it. She got as far as the lawn when one of the girls, Krenwinkel, got up with her. Krenwinkel drove the knife into her 28 times. By the time Watson arrived to do more damage, Folger just said, "I give up. I'm already dead. Take me." Tate was now crying in the living room with Atkins standing next to her. Tate pleaded with him. It didn't work. She was also stabbed many times. Atkins used some of her blood to write "pig" on the wall. Manson had given orders earlier to leave a sign, something witchy. They all returned to the ranch and went to bed. Atkins later said, "I could not think about anything. It was almost as if I had passed out, blacked out. My head was blank. There was nothing in me." When the media found out about the murders, they called it an orgy of violence. The LA Times wrote ritualistic slayings. This caused widespread panic, especially in an era where more conservative folks believed these freaks with long hair were destroying the fabric of society. Some reports even said Sebring had been wearing a black hood, a Satanist's hood. Then there was Polanski, a man who made the horror movie about Satanists called Rosemary's Baby. Some said Polanski himself was an occultist. There were rumors that he'd been at a party in London and said, "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, who will be the next to go?" Then the phone rang and he was told about the slayings. That never really happened. Even with all the hysteria, Manson wasn't content with the panic. The next night, he and 6 of the family went out hunting in an old Ford. They drove for 3 hours and then pulled up outside a house, 3301 Waverly Drive. They had no idea who lived there. Manson ordered Watson and Krenwinkel and a now new-to-be killer Leslie Lulu Van Houten to do the killing. Manson had just snooped around the house, and when he got back to the car, he told them what to do. Inside the house was the supermarket executive Leno LeBianca and his wife, Rosemary. Both were stabbed by Watson with a bayonet, and Leno was stabbed by the girls with a knife. The word "war" was carved into her belly. Watson took a shower, and the girls used blood to write "rise" and "death to pigs" on the walls. Krenwinkel also daubed the words "Hilter Skelter" on the fridge. She meant to write "Helter Skelter," the name of a Beatles song. She also planted a steak knife in the woman's neck. At that point, Manson and the others had already driven away, leaving the killers to make their own way home. As for Helter Skelter in Britain, it's a swirling slide for kids. According to Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor and writer of the best-known Manson book Helter Skelter, the cult believed in a race war related to that name. They killed because they wanted the murders to be blamed on blacks, which would result in a race war, and they would hide out in the desert as it happened. When the war was over, they'd return and take power from the winners of the war, the blacks. This theory is as far out as the hippies he was talking about. Tom O'Neill doesn't believe a word of it. In fact, he said Bugliosi made a lot of it up and lied about a lot more. For that, Bugliosi threatened to sue O'Neill if he ever published the book. Manson himself denied there was ever a Helter Skelter-focused plan. He once explained why the term was used, saying, "It means confusion, literally. It doesn't mean any war with anyone. It doesn't mean that some people are going to kill other people. Helter Skelter is confusion." He also said as far as lining up someone for some kind of Helter Skelter trip, that's the district attorney's motive. That's the only thing he could find a motive for to throw on top of all the confusion he had. There was no such thing in my mind as Helter Skelter. Let's remember here that Manson didn't actually kill anyone, so there had to be a conspiracy. The press went along with it. Manson might not have been a serial killer, he was portrayed as something even worse. It was said the Manson family were bloodthirsty robots controlled by an evil Pied Piper who followed Manson with blind obedience. They belonged to a hippie drug and murder cult. They were the result of children taking drugs, growing their hair long, and complaining about war and corruption, and talking too much about freedom. They were what happens when you don't do what you're told. That's why many people think the CIA might have had a hand in creating this kind of chaos. Okay, so back to the main story. At first, the LAPD said there was no connection between the Tate and LaBianca homicides, although they couldn't ignore the similarities and some connection with what they called the singing group The Beatles. According to Bugliosi's account, the Manson family had left the Spahn Ranch to go searching for the place in the desert where they would lay low while whites and blacks fought each other in the race war. It's true that Manson and some of his followers had relocated to Death Valley. That's where they were later picked up by the cops, not for murder but for car theft. The officers involved had no idea who they had on their hands. Meanwhile, cops in LA spoke to bikers who talked about how the family was linked to the murders. Also, a friend of Atkins had told cops that she'd been involved in the murders. She also was wanted in connection with another murder. The victim was Gary Hinman, and he'd been killed prior to the other killings. The reason was apparently Manson believed he owed money to the family. In this case, Manson had done some of the dirty work, slashing Hinman and cutting some of his ear off. Still, Hinman was killed by another member of the family. The word political piggy was written on the wall, although this wasn't a politically motivated crime. Years later, it was said the killing was simply over drugs or drug money. The political thing could have been a ruse because the family wanted the blame to fall on the Black Panthers, an African-American political organization. Atkins admitted to police she'd been involved in that murder. While in a detention center, she then told the inmates that the family was behind the other murders. Now cops went after the family. They got warrants and arrested Watson and some of the other women. Remember, Manson and the others were already in detention for the car theft thing. Now they had most of them rounded up. They used fingerprint evidence to connect some dots, and police also found the gun used to shoot Parent, but they didn't find the knives. They did, however, find bloodied clothes ditched after the Tate murders. The trial was a media fest if there ever was one. The girls acted the part, laughing and smiling and generally looking like crazed hippies. No doubt they were crazed hippies, but they might not have been as demonic as was made out. They were young and stupid, if anything, and also heartless, brutal killers. A member named Linda Kasabian, who hadn't killed anyone, had been a lookout on one of the nights. She might have also stopped another set of murders from happening. It helped the prosecution greatly that she testified against the others. Charles Manson was eventually convicted on 7 counts of first-degree murder for the Tate LaBianca crimes. Manson, as well as Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten, were handed the death penalty, but those were commuted to life sentences after the abolishment of the death penalty in California. People said that was the end of the 60s era. Idealism was dead. It is Manson only, really, who has gone down in history. The girls might also have been his victims, was the rationale given by some people. Manson was the male puppet master, even if Watson had done much of the slaying. Atkins died in prison in 2009. Krenwinkel, now 73, is still in prison. 72-year-old Van Houten is also still in prison right now, as is 75-year-old Tex Watson. Manson died in prison in 2017. He didn't rant a lot during the years of his incarceration, coming off for some people as the nobody he once admitted to being. To others, he was the fiend of all fiends. Why did they really do what they did? It's doubtful the race war was anything to do with it. Manson might have been the leader, but if he had some big grand plan that only a demigod could implement, it's perhaps a bit overblown. He was an angry man with an influence over impressionable lost folks. Like many maniacs, he also tried to justify the unjustifiable. He once said, "These children that come at you with knives, they are your children. You taught them them. I didn't teach them. I just tried to help them stand up. Most of the people at the ranch that you call the family were just people that you did not want. As for if the CIA had anything to do with the Manson family, well, that will always remain top secret, but so-called spooks could well have lived in the shadows. Now you need to watch the most evil cults in the history of mankind, or have a look at what really happened in Waco, Texas, a story about a cult.